What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Rutgers Rundown podcast, episode 7. Here today, Nick Hart, alongside my co-host Matthew Mangum. A lot to talk about in the world of Rutgers sports. We have Rutgers basketball headed to the Big Ten tournament, Rutgers women's basketball falling in the first round of the Big Ten tournament, Rutgers wrestling competed at the Big Ten tournament this weekend, and we have some spring sports to talk about as well with baseball, softball, and both men's and women's lacrosse. But Matt, we'll get right into it. Rutgers men's basketball, they end the season, or the regular season, that is, with a nice win against Minnesota, 75-67 in overtime, giving them the 11th seed in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, I mean, again, it wasn't really the best game from Rutgers, let Minnesota come back into the game, but big takeaway again is just Dylan Harper, such a special player, 22 points. Great game from him. And yeah, Rutgers is the number 11 seed in the Big Ten tournament now. They'll face USC, who they beat earlier this season, 95-85. And then, fortunately for them, if they win that game, they got to play Purdue. So tough path for them. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I mean, it sucks because obviously we know should have been March Madness. This should have been, oh, will they make the Big Ten tournament? That shouldn't question shouldn't be in place. But this is where they are. We'll see what they can do where they are now.
Yeah, and that's kind of been the thing is like everybody keeps saying, well, Rutgers needs to go on a run, Rutgers needs to go on a run. Well, this year is not the year to run the Big Ten tournament. You're not going to get through Purdue. You're not going to get through Michigan. You're not going to get through Michigan State. The team's
Hmm.
too good. And I mean, I think honestly the ceiling for this team would probably be playing two Big Ten tournament games. I
I
think
agree.
USC is a winnable game. Rutgers beat them at the rack, but I mean Purdue absolutely embarrassed you last time that you played them just, less or about a week ago. I think it was exactly a week ago. Um it, it's not I don't think it's possible for this Rutgers team. I think two games would be like best case scenario for Rutgers right now. And
Yeah, I agree.
and again, I have to reiterate the point that how much it's kind of a letdown because of what this team was supposed to be. And I know we say it pretty much every time, but Rutgers was supposed to be the powerhouse team. They were supposed to run the Big Ten, which I I don't even know if that would have been the case had Rutgers been the team we thought they were going to be. So I feel like the Big Ten this year is, I mean, it's always a powerhouse, but I feel like this year especially, there's so many good teams that even if this Rutgers team did pan out, I could still see them being maybe the fifth or sixth best team in the Big Ten. I don't think they would have ran this conference this year.
No, I mean, I was looking at I saw some people's predictions on Twitter ahead of the season, like their preseason predictions and how it actually panned out. And yeah, I think most people had Rutgers on like a top five, top six spot. I think that's a pretty realistic expectation. I mean, you're right. Look at Michigan State, look at Maryland, look at Michigan, look at Purdue. These are all teams that, were really, really good this year. And I think a big part of that is, yeah, Rutgers had Harper and Bailey. I feel like anything could be possible. But again, it goes down to, the team doesn't have a lot of depth. The transfers didn't really seem that promising. Um, Otherwise, look at the other teams and they got players more than just, they have so many guys. So I think for Rutgers, around fifth to sixth in the Big Ten would have been a really, really good finish, kind of around that pack. And obviously that didn't happen. So yeah, it really, I agree with you, Nick. I think two wins is, or not two wins, two games in the Big Ten tournament is the best case scenario for Rutgers. I mean, USC has not been good recently. They've lost six of their last seven games. And yeah, the Rutgers beat them at the rack. It was a 10-point win. The defense wasn't really great. They're going to have to be much better this time around against Desmond Claude, Wesley Yates, one of the best freshmen in the country besides Harper and Bailey. So it's going to be another game where I think if Rutgers can't defend USC, it's going to be another shootout. And Michael said at post game yesterday, we held Minnesota to 67. It's going to be really, really important to defense because this team can, for the most part, they can score points. We see that. The question has always just been the defense. And there's been games where Rutgers hasn't scored, like against Purdue, they lost 68-50 at the rack a couple months ago. But the defense has been the biggest issue for the team this year, I'd say, for the most part. And yeah, that's going to be really crucial against USC. And if they go on to face Purdue, they want even a slight chance of winning. You got to defend. I mean, you got to let them score 100 last time out. So the defense is really, really important.
Well, and you look at even the Minnesota game, and it was a close game, and Minnesota shot so poorly from beyond the arc.
Really bad.
They had one made three in regulation. They were one of 11 from beyond the arc in regulation, one of five in overtime. They shot
Wow.
12.5%, Matt. 12.5%, and still somehow managed to get this game to go into overtime, ultimately losing by 8. But I mean, Rutgers, they were better, but not that much better from beyond the arc. They were 4 of 17. And I feel like that's another issue that has kind of plagued this team this season has been when it's going well, it all looks good. When Dylan and Ace are doing what they're supposed to do, the surrounding players can kind of fill in and make a decent, supporting cast. But when Dylan and Ace aren't having their best games, that doesn't really happen. I mean, you look at the box score and you say, well, Dylan had 22, but it wasn't a terrible night. He was 8 of 19 from the field, 1 of 5 from three, but you didn't see a lot of production from Bailey, who only had 6 points,
Oh,
So,
he had a bad game. I
so
mean, he did have 9 rebounds, but yeah, defensive wise, yeah.
that's kind of been how this team has gone is if both of those guys aren't on, it might not look the prettiest, but luckily for Rutgers and unfortunately for Minnesota, that was probably one of the worst shooting performances we've seen from a Big Ten team from three this season. I mean, that was almost lucky for Rutgers, and only two of those shots fell. I mean, you got to think that that's obviously not going to happen in many games.
I'm not gonna lie to you, Nick. That was like Rutgers wins basketball numbers right there.
Well, we'll get into that in a little bit. We'll get into that
No,
next.
like the
But
two of whatever from three. No, but yeah, that's totally true. I mean, Ace Bailey, 6 points, not a great night for him. And you're right with the offense. I mean, the first half against Michigan and Ann Arbor 2 weeks ago, I forgot the exact stats, but they scored 57 in that first half. I mean, they couldn't have missed a shot. I think they were like 60% at least from the floor and probably over 50% from three.
I want to say they shot 67% from the field in the first half in that game.
Yeah. So like whatever was going on in that first half, obviously it's really hard to keep up with that, but you gotta like that was insane. And then the shoot like this against Minnesota is just really, really disappointing. And it's very inconsistent. And yeah, another thing is Minnesota, didn't shoot well from the line either. They were 56%. So, Rutgers wasn't the greatest either, 65%. But yeah, Minnesota had a really, really bad offensive day. And Rutgers didn't have a great offensive day either. But because they had Dylan Harper, he kind of, proved to be the X factor for Rutgers in that game. And it just shows how important he is to the team. I mean, he's so, so important. And after the game, he was on the court soaking it in one last time,
Well,
signing kids' autographs.
presumably one last time. We could be wishful thinkers, but I would say there's a 99.999% chance that he's gone next year.
I think there's a higher chance to win the lottery than him coming back to Rutgers next year.
I think something would have to go terribly wrong between now and the draft for Dylan Harper to come back to the Banks next year. As much as fans want to see it, I know the fans were chanting one more year in
Yeah.
the stadium. Um, but yeah, that's gonna be the final regular season game and final game he plays at Jersey Mike's Arena. And you know what? I think Dylan and Ace lived up to the expectation. I think both of them have been exceptional this season. Again, it comes down to the team, though. It's great to have great players in basketball, but if you don't have a team around those great players, it
Hmm.
doesn't do you much. I mean, you look back at the Indiana game, Ace had what, 39 points, and Rutgers still lost. So I think overall, you look back on the season and you say those two guys lived up to the hype. I mean, Dylan Harper is now the all-time leading freshman scorer in Rutgers history. And I just want to talk about that last possession. I think it was to tie the game, was it, or take the lead with that? I don't even know how to describe it. He spun one way, then spun back the other way, put it up, and got it to fall. And I mean, that's just such a high level play. The footwork was beautiful, just knowing the situation. And that's what makes Dylan Harper such a special player is his ability to just see and anticipate anything on a basketball court.
Yeah, I mean, high basketball IQ player. He's, you know, so great for his age. I mean, he's a freshman and, you know, freshmen obviously have mistakes and stuff. They're not perfect. I mean, he has his bad games too. Everybody does, but the amount of talent he has for someone his age is insane, and that's why he's going to be, a top pick in the NBA draft. And it just really hurts that Rutgers couldn't, build off that and have a good season and make March Madness. And that was expected. And the fact that it really does feel like Rutgers wasted it. I mean, you have these two generational freshman talents, and yeah, they have outstanding seasons. They put up crazy games. You win some cool games against teams like Illinois and whatever and what have you. But then at the end of the day, you finish below 500 in the regular season. You probably are going to be a second round exit in the Big Ten tournament. Like it makes you think, what if? And that's all you can play in your head is, what if they beat Kansas State? What if they beat Princeton? What if they beat Penn State on the road? What if they beat Wisconsin at home? It's a lot of what ifs.
What if they
What if
even
Harper
beat
never got
Michigan?
hurt?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I think the only thing you could say that isn't a what if about this season is them making the tournament because they're not going to make the tournament.
Yeah.
It seems possible that they may make the college basketball crown. I don't know if you've heard about
Yeah.
this, but it's a tournament out in Vegas, um, which will be, let's see, it'll be two rounds and then the championship, so three total rounds. Not really sure. I guess that's a new thing they're doing this season, but
Yeah, I think it is.
hopefully Rutgers can get a spot in that. I don't know, how fans would react to that because obviously you're playing in March, you're playing college basketball, you want to be in March Madness, but at this point you'll take any extra games for those two in a Rutgers uniform that you can get. But we'll
Mm.
move over now to some Rutgers women's basketball, which their season, Matt, is all but over. I'll say that just because there is the possibility. I've heard some inklings about them possibly getting an WNIT bid, which I don't know how, but there is a there is a possibility. But Rutgers women's basketball lost in the first round of the Big Ten tournament, 84-60 to Nebraska, and it was kind of just much of the same from Rutgers women's basketball that we've seen all season. The offense wasn't there, adjustments weren't made, and credit to Nebraska because they were the far better team all around. I mean, Rutgers had what, three players in double figures, and Maya Petticord, Awa Sidibe, and Destiny Adams, who had 25 and 10 rebounds. It was just not a good game whatsoever. I was out there on the call, and you kind of got the feeling as soon as the second half started that that game was pretty much over.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, it just this team just doesn't have a lot of offensive talent. You have Adams, and then besides that, like I said, Lacey will have a game every now and then. Maya Petticore will step in every now and then. The thing is, without McMillan in the lineup, this team will not win any games pretty much. I mean, I know they beat Penn State and
And Purdue.
Purdue. Yes, those are bad teams. I
Exactly.
know Rutgers is not a good team either, but you're not going to win any te games against teams that are actually, I'm going to say decent. Any against decent teams. Because if you look at this lineup, this roster, you could say, without McMillan, it's very similar to the roster they had last season. I know obviously you brought in Lacey, you know, you brought in Janae Walker, but you lose, like, obviously, like, you lose Hurt and stuff like that. It's just, I feel like, oh yeah, Brown.
Erica
Yeah,
Lafayette.
yeah. So I feel like because without McMillan in the lineup, this team doesn't really look complete. They're like, I'm sorry, it's just like Lisa Thompson cannot be a starter.
And this kind of absolutely contradicts everything that we just said about the men's team because we talked about how excellent the two freshmen has been and how one player can't make a team, but one player can make a big difference on an offense, and especially when that player is the primary ball handler, because Rutgers doesn't really have that primary ball handler anymore. I mean, Maya Petticord and Lisa Thompson have taken over that role in the what, 6 or 7 games that McMiller's been absent for, but it's a much different pace when you have a player like Lisa Thompson and Maya Petticord who are good players but they're not true ball handlers. They can get the ball across, but I feel like you're confident in your squad when you have Kiyomi McMillan handling the ball. You know she's going to find the open person. She's going to be able to dribble herself out of certain situations. And that was a problem that Rutgers had was against Nebraska they would come up with a pick, and Nebraska would then jump the screen and double team whoever was handling the ball, and Rutgers wasn't able to do anything with that. It was essentially the double team came, and Rutgers kind of just pulled back out and waited for it to settle back down. But then you do that over and over, and all of a sudden there's no time on the shot clock. You have no play developing, and that's a lot of Rutgers' game is that high pick and roll. With players like Lacey, players like Adams, even Zakara Perkins. And you also see China Cornwell in that role. She didn't play against Nebraska, assuming it was still due to the injury. despite the fact that she was off the availability report,
Yeah.
unfortunately wasn't able to ask Coquise Washington about her at the press conference. But disappointing season to what I would chalk up to a disappointing season because there was a lot of expectations for this team with the talent that they brought in. And I think they definitely fell short of those expectations.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't care if what McMiller does. Like, how do I say this? I know she's had off the court issues with the players. I get it. You're trying to build a program, trying to build a culture here. Don't let that slide. But the truth is, Rob McMillan's team has no chance of winning those type of games. I mean, she had against Nebraska previously 33 points, against Illinois 22 points. And those games, Rutgers could have almost won because of McMiller. And now you see her without Nebraska in the second meeting this season between the two teams, and Rutgers was never really in it from the at all. And then against Nebraska at Georgia Mike early in the season, they were in it right to the very end. So I get it. I understand the coaching standpoint. That's not gonna if she had a locker room fight, which we've heard sources say, that's not gonna slide with the team. But like, yeah, if you don't play her, you're gonna lose all these games. So at the end of the day, it goes down to do you focus winning or do you focus on having making sure you're coaching like you're coaching these players. I get where Cookie's coming from, but it's just like it sucks because during the lineup they had really had a chance of winning some more games, and down the stretch they didn't have her, and they really could have used her.
I think you look at a game like Northwestern and even, on your West Coast trip, you probably could have pulled out one of those games. But those are two games that could have made the difference of you being a 15 seed or you being a 12 or even an 11 like the men's team is. But instead, that's how the season ended. Rutgers ended with three conference wins, barely snuck into the tournament, played a solid Nebraska team who actually went on to, what was it? They won their first round game, won their second round game, ended up getting knocked out on the third day. Um, but it was a very talented team. I mean, there's a lot of players. You look at Alexis Markowski, who was a beast in the paint for her squad, 19 points, 10 rebounds. Also, surprisingly enough, was 2 of 5 from beyond the arc. Not usually a three-point
Hmm.
shooter, but knocked it down. And then just all around scoring. Britt Prince, the freshman, 10 points. Um, Amaya Hargrove with 13 and Alberti Rimdahl with 12. It was just a well-balanced attack. And another problem with this game was Nebraska shot so much better all around than the first meeting. The first meeting they were what, maybe they made two or three
Yeah.
three-pointers. This game they shot 13 of 31 from beyond the arc and 55% from the field. So a tough loss for Rutgers. Tough way to end the season. Obviously, you were hoping to win a game at least. But hey, if it's any consolation, you made it to the Big Ten tournament this year. I don't know if that really is the consolation prize, but there's a lot of questions going into next season. You lose, I believe, you graduate 4 players this year with Awa Sidibe, Destiny Adams, China Cornwell, and JoJo Lacey. And next season, you have, I want to say, 7 players on the roster right now, which 2 of them are walk-on players. So you have a starting 5. That's pretty much all you have. Um, and I don't know where you go if you go to the transfer portal, if you try to recruit from now until then, but definitely something that needs to be worked on going into the next campaign.
Yeah. I mean, the recruiting standpoint, it's been super duper quiet. They have one recruit. I mean, I don't know how much you know about stuff, but I haven't heard any other rumors. Nothing. I've heard nothing about any other recruits.
The only recruit I know that's signed for next season right now is Precious Wheeler, who is I want to say 6'3" center forward type player. And that's good because you're losing 3 forwards if you
Yeah,
count.
that's true.
Um, but then again, how you're not going to replace 3 players with one, and especially not a freshman who is a solid player, but isn't as highly rated as somebody like a Keelan McMiller. Like I don't know exactly what Wheeler's rating is, but I know it's not a 5-star. So we'll see going into next year. But Matty M, you were out in Illinois for the wrestling Big Ten championships, so we'll take it over to you, our wrestling expert. So how was the weekend for the Rutgers wrestling team?
Yeah, Nick. First I'm gonna look back a little bit at last year's Big Ten, just kind of put it in perspective. So, last year, our went to the Big Ten championships in Maryland and had a really, really solid showing. Finished sixth overall. Dylan Shaver was a Big Ten title, the first in 2019. Now you look at this year at Big Tens, there was a lot of expectations. Dean Peterson, Dylan Shaver, two guys that definitely could have been Big Ten champions, you could say again for the second for well, Shaver the second straight year, Peterson this year, and then guys as well like Slavakuski, Cartagena, Walsh, kind of all very finishing in the top five. I had expectations for all of them. It didn't really pan out that way, and it was a very, very wild weekend for Rutgers. Three wrestlers had to medically forfeit due to injury, which that also affects how Rutgers finished out the tournament. Finishing ninth overall. Last year they finished sixth overall in the team standing, so that definitely had a part. Dean Peterson made the semifinals, lost to Caleb Smith of Nebraska 3-1 in sudden victory. A really, really tough match for him. Caleb Smith was just so great defensively, got the sudden victory. Smith got the takedown over Peterson to win the match. And then at the end of that match, Peterson was kind of holding his knee a little bit. I was actually mad side trying to film in case he advanced. I was hoping that I could talk to him after, but unfortunately he lost. So I was right there on the mat. I saw a mad side. I saw him holding his knee. Looked like he was in a lot of pain after he walked to the locker room with his face and head in the towel. I saw him yesterday on the podium after he placed sixth overall. So he seems fine. Like not obviously he's hurt, but he seems like he's able to walk around and everything. We'll see what his status is for NCAAs though, because he did qualify for NCAAs at least, and because he medically forfeited, since he basically lost semifinals, he was guaranteed a sixth place finish because you can wrestle back to a third place finish once you lose in the first round. It's probably a little hard to explain, but basically if you lose your first match, you're still in it. You can wrestle back the best spot to a third place finish. So Peterson, since he obviously had to forfeit, the best you can give was sixth. Now for Shawver, had a great start, beat Northwestern's guy in the first round. Then in the quarterfinals, faced Braden Davis of Penn State, a guy he lost to earlier season 2-1 at JMA. And this was the best bout for Rutgers in the entire Big Ten championships. He beat Braden Davis 3-1, a really, really good showing from Dylan Shaver. And after that match, I had faith he can get to the Big Ten title again. So had to face Drake Ayala of Iowa, a guy Peterson actually lost to last year at Big Tens because Ayala was 125. He moved up to 133. And Shawver did not look good. He lost 8-2. Drake Ayala completely dominated it. So Shawver had to wrestle back for third place finish. I thought he would get it there. When we get to Nick Bazakis of Ohio State, a guy he beat earlier this season and also beat last season. He lost 6-4, close match. And then in the fifth place match was facing Braxton Brown of Maryland, a guy he lost to this season at Maryland. Beat last year on route to the Big Ten title, and he lost 9-6 in sudden victory. So a really, really tough showing for Shaver. After beating Braden Davis at Penn State, he loses three straight matches, two of them against guys he's beaten previously. So he finished sixth. Joey Oliveri also finished sixth. Pretty solid from him. Had some tough competition. He had to face Bo Bartlett of Penn State. He lost 4-2 to him. Had to face Brock Hardy of Nebraska. Lost 11-1. So there were some tough matches for him. Still finished sixth. Andy Clark also finished sixth. Also had some tough matches. So those guys all are NCAA qualifiers. Good stuff from them. I think Oliveri and Clark I'm impressed with. Shaver and Peterson I'm a little bit disappointed with. Peterson was hurt, so I can kind of give him the benefit of the doubt, but Shaver, a tough showing from him. Connor Harrer, a true freshman, finishing 10th or ninth, I mean, excuse me. Not bad for me. He was a 10th seed. I'm impressed with that. Anthony White, a tough tournament. 10th seed, finished 10th. Was one win away from qualifying for nationals, but he lost in sudden victory. So tough for him. Jackson Turley. Where did I start with Jackson Turley? This guy, he was so good his freshman year, was All-American and everything, and like he's not even going to the national tournament. Really, really disappointing from him. It's his last year he's on the bank. He's a grad student. Um, you know, in the past was just so, so good. Finished fourth at Big Ten last year, or fifth, I'm not 100% sure, but lost to a guy from Maryland, Branson John, a guy that was kind of not like, kind of like a nobody. And Branson John's actually going to NCAAs now, funny enough. And Turley isn't. Turley got ninth place. He pinned the guy from Wisconsin to get ninth place. But I mean, on his end, it's just super disappointing finishing ninth place, not even going to nationals. And the last guy that Rutgers got hurt at the tournament was Cartagena Walsh at 184. The redshirt freshman, unfortunately, had to also quit or not quit, but forfeit. His match with Ryder Rogoski was so interesting in the consolation round. Ryder, I'm not sure if you saw it, but Rogoski had him like picked up and he pulled him down the mat and Cardigan Walsh like hit his head on the mat. And I didn't actually see this because Rutgers had like two guys going at once on different mats. So I was watching the other mat and then I can hear Frankie Plummer next to me calling it, and he's like talking about Cardigan Walsh. And I look at to that mat and I see Cardigan Walsh like laying down and he like goes out of it. So they actually disqualified Rogotsky for, dangerous play. Like, what he did was he slammed into the mat illegally. Goodell and Ohio State's coach were really getting into it, kind of yelling a little bit. So to play it safe, Rutgers just forfeited Cardigan Walsh from the rest of the Big Tens. But because he got the win from Rogotsky disqualifying, he's going to NCAAs. So that's going to his end. 197 PJ Casal filling in for John Posnanski. Of course, Posnanski decided to retire from wrestling literally like 2 weeks ago, probably because of injuries. But Casal went 1 of 4, finished 12th. Not expecting much from him. He was a fill-in player. And then last guy, Jaroslav Savakuski, the heavyweight. Lost in the quarterfinals on Friday, Saturday, excuse me, and then he had a consolation match. And before that match even happened, it was announced that he was withdrawn from the tournament for medical reasons. So I think, if I remember correctly, he was the first one to withdraw. So, I asked Goodell after the matches on Saturday what was his status. He just said that, yeah, he's hurt a little bit. He didn't say what the injury was, but he said he's day to day. I wanted to play it safe. So I imagine that's what they did for Peterson and Cartagena Walsh as well. Just play it safe because they all say that Big Ten is a qualifying stage for nationals. Get a good seed at Big Ten so you can set up yourself for nationals. And I completely get that. But like on Shaver's part, I mean, he could have done so much better. And Peterson, I get it, played safe. That's completely fair. But yeah, Rutgers finished had I think four guys finished. Let me see. They had four guys finish in the top six and five qualified for nationals. Compared to last year, they had seven qualified for nationals, and they had Shaver win the Big Ten title. So it was a step back this year. And I saw a table as well. Each team, how they performed compared to their seeds. And Rutgers was the worst team. They were minus 14 when wrestling up to their seed and where they finished and everything. So I do think a big part of that was three guys not going more matches. Peterson, Cartagena, Walsh, and Slavakowski. But I mean, it's still the end of the day, you know, Oliveri, Shaver, and Clark all lost their fifth place matches to finish sixth. So it's a little disappointing on Rutgers' end.
Yeah, and I mean, especially after the season that they had as a team, I mean, I feel like it was probably one of the better seasons that Rutgers has had in a while. Wrestling really well against some of the top teams. What was it?
Yeah.
What was it? Ohio State earlier in the season. Um, and it's one of those sports where Rutgers is right on the cusp of being one of those like blue blood programs, I feel like, but they're not quite there. They're not quite at the level of, the Penn State type schools, which granted, nobody is going to be at that level for a long time because Penn State is just otherworldly. Um, but I think
Yeah.
Rutgers has a good foundation going forward, and I agree. It's a little disappointing to see the finish compared to last year, but I also feel like when you take everything into account, this is a productive season so far, and hey, there's still national tournaments to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of that as well is Rutgers is a really, really good dual match team, a dual meet team. They can win a lot of matches. I mean, they beat Illinois, who finished fifth at tournament, and Illinois did much better as a team. I would say individually than Rutgers did at Big Tens. They had a Big Ten champion, Lucas Bird. I have to say that match, um, Lucas Bird pinned Drake Ayala, the guy who beat Chauver in the Big Ten match. Holy mackerel, it was insane. It's so hyped. Crazy, crazy stuff. But Rutgers beat the Illinois team at George Mike's Arena, but then Illinois overall as a individually did better than Rutgers at Big Ten. So that's the thing is Rutgers has a good team to win these type of matches. They almost beat Ohio State, but when it comes down to the nationals or postseason, they haven't been able to live up to the hype. I mean, maybe last year they did with Chauver and then two All-Americans, but you know, it felt like this Big Ten Rutgers could have had Pearson and Chauver, maybe both in Big Ten titles. Slavakuski's get top three. Cardigan Walsh get top five, top six. Similar for Oliveri and Clark, top five, top six. And I think obviously Turley as well could have been a top six. If you had Paz, he could have been in top six. So there is hard luck with injuries, like I said. but there's still a lot to be disappointed about. Is how do you beat the Illinois team and then they do so much better than you at Big Tens? That's kind of where it goes into play. How do you almost beat Ohio State on the road? You lose by one match and then they, finish top six at Big Tens. So we'll see. Look ahead to Nationals now in 2 weeks in Philly. Again, I'll be there. We'll hear from Goodell probably next week. Media availability ahead of NCAAs, and I'm sure he'll tell us the stats on Peterson, Cardi, Walsh, and Slavikowski. Slavikowski actually didn't qualify for nationals, but he's looking to earn an at-large bid. But I think we'll get the at-large bid because he's still a good enough wrestler. He was ranked top 10 in the RPI when the season ended, and then Turley still could get a at-large bid. I don't know if they're gonna give it to him. I mean, he's been wildly inconsistent this season, but we'll see. So I think they could get six guys to nationals. I think Slavikowski could get it. The good thing is, will he wrestle? Will he? Will he? We'll see. I mean, this is his last season of his career, so I don't know. So all we can do is wait and see if those guys will wrestle and if Slavikowski will get an at-large bid.
We shall see. But we'll go from one successful team to another successful team. The Rutgers women's lacrosse team, Matt, 5-2 to start the season. And listen, they've had some pretty impressive wins, some close losses. I mean, you look at that Army loss, 10-9 to start the season, and Army is usually a pretty solid program. So you had some hope, but Rutgers has played really, really well as of late. As you said, lost to Army, lost to 12-6 to number 4 Yale, but I mean, it's Yale, so you kind of expect that at that point. And then they knock off number 16 Stony Brook last Wednesday in an overtime thriller. And then they come out and beat Hofstra 11-8. This is a solid team. And, I think if they continue to play the way they've played, I think you're going to see the season end with this Rutgers team with a ranking next to their name.
Yeah, well, they actually just got ranked today, actually, which is pretty cool. They ranked number 19th. They started the season off ranked, and they are not started the season off ranked, but they were ranked at one point this season. I'm actually like 90% sure they were. Anyway, yeah, completely right, Nick. I had a lot of questions with this team. You lose Cassie Spillis. Where are the goals gonna come from? I have to say, I've been really impressed. This team's defense has been really, really well, and the offense has been great too. I mean, they haven't scored tons of goals, minus the Lemoyne win. I mean, that's Lemoyne. But the Stony Brook game, it was a really, really close, low-scoring game. Same for Hofstra, only 11 goals. But I have to say, I mean, they're winning games, and I remember thinking in my head, or I think I said on the podcast last week, this team's really good, but that Stony Brook game was gonna be a real test. Hey, you won it. That's a great test. Now you look at the next game. You face Princeton, who's ranked number 11 in the country. They're 5-1. So again, another test. We'll see how they do in that test. They're at home. But I have to say, a big part of that has been Lexi Cold Iron. She has been really, really great. I think I saw another stat. Let me fact check myself, but I think she's like top two in the country with save percentage and everything like that. I think I saw a tweet from that. But the transfer from Lafayette's been insane. You lose Sophia Cardello, another good goalkeeper, and now you have, let's see, Cold Iron is doing a great job. Okay, save percentage. Cold Iron's top three in save percentage with 59%. So that's really good. And then goals against average, she's like 19th. Okay, I thought I saw a stat somewhere where she was like top three and top one and something, but the save percentage is really solid. She's third place, only trailing Claire Mahoney of Brown and Jocelyn Torres of Ohio State. So a really solid goalkeeper, and I think again against Princeton, she's gonna be really crucial because Princeton's a good team. They've had Rutgers number of the past couple of years. That's gonna be another close game for Rutgers.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the thing with this team is that they're winning close games, which is something that is kind of a measure of a good team. I mean, you beat Hofstra by 3, that's a close game. You beat Stony Brook in overtime, which was a ranked game, and a lot of the wins this season haven't been blowout wins. So to be able to finish out late in these games, I feel like is a great sign for this team. And I agree. I think it's nice to see the success that they're having, especially losing probably the greatest player in Rutgers women's lacrosse history. I mean, scoring wise, we know she's the leader, but Cassidy Spillis was a great player. She was a great leader on this team, and you kind of thought like, hey, this is going to be a little bit of a down year. You lost your best player. You kind of lose some of that momentum, and they're taking it in stride. I mean, Rutgers has played really well. Like you said, the two losses, both close games. And Hey, undefeated at home so far. They're 3-0 at SHI, so
Yes.
looking to make it 4-0 against Princeton, and I think that'll be a nice win for Rutgers, especially because after that they start with Big Ten play as they travel to Oregon to take on the Ducks. But Matt, unfortunately, not the same fate for the Rutgers men's lacrosse team. Has been pretty much the opposite of the women's lacrosse team this season. 3-4. They start the season with a nice win against Lehigh, and obviously that lost to Stony Brook, and it's kind of been downhill from there. They lost to Stony Brook, lost to Army 9-3, got a win against Loyola, and then back-to-back losses against St. Joe's and number four Princeton. I mean, where do you go from here if you're this team? I mean, it, your goaltending's been outstanding. You know, Carden Stoller's always going to be solid, but it seems like the offense has just been non-existent in a lot of these losses.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like after that Stony Brook loss kind of derailed everything. Army was going to be a tough game. We knew Army was going to be a hard game for Rutgers. They lost that one. Then, they beat Loyola. I'm thinking maybe they can get back on track. You play St. Joe's at home. This is a really a good game where you can probably get back, a get right game. They lose that game. And then you're kind of like, oh, this is getting tough now because you already lost to Stony Brook and St. Joe's. And we mentioned earlier in the podcast episodes, you can't lose these games in lacrosse. It's such a small committee or such a small selection team to go to NCAA tournament. You can't lose these non-conference games. They're so important. And then, yeah, you lose to St. Joe's, you lose to Stony Brook. Those are two horrible losses. We knew Princeton would be tough, 11-5 loss. I mean, it looks pretty tough. But now, I'm going to say it again. You got two home games against St. Joe's and UMass. UMass is ranked. You got to win both of these games. You'll be 5-4 heading into Big Ten play. And then maybe, hopefully, you can string together probably, I would say, five Big Ten games. You got to win three of them. You got to win three of them. And then if you do all that, I could say you probably can make the tournament. If not, if you don't win these next two games and then win three Big Ten games, you're not going to the tournament, and this season will be unsuccessful. So that's how I think the season has to go. It's gonna be really tough for Rutgers though. They can only lose two more games. That means.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, the way the offense is played, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. I mean, JJ Aiello started the season hot, hasn't really done much since. And you're not seeing a lot of pressure and high opportunity shots for anyone really on this team. And obviously coming into the season, Rutgers did lose quite a few of their top goal scorers, but you you had the feeling early on that this was going to be an issue. Then you watched the first couple games and you said, all right, maybe Rutgers has figured it out a little bit, but it just doesn't seem like the case now. The scoring has dried up. Um, the defense hasn't been great, hasn't been terrible. I think Stoller has saved them in a lot of games. But I mean, you
Hmm.
look at some of your top goal scorers, like JJ Aiello has 6 goals. Colin Cardilla has six, or excuse me, Aiello has seven. Cardilla has six. Mongilo has six, and Colin Kelly has six. So your top scorers don't even have double-digit goals yet. So
Yeah.
a lot that needs to be done. I think the offense really needs to click it into gear because when you have, again, I hate to keep bringing up the same point, but when you have a goaltender like Stoller, you can be in any game. And they really have been in every game this season. It's just the offense has not been there. And that's just not going to cut it when it comes to Big Ten play.
Yeah, the funny thing is, like, the women's lacrosse team is very kind of, they were in a similar spot. They lost offensive talent. How would they respond? They've responded. The defense and offense have both been great. For Rutgers men's lacrosse, the defense has been pretty good, I'd say, for the most part. The offense has been not good at all. So that's where you see it. Rutgers women's lacrosse lost players, but they're whatever you say, they're transfers. You could say with the goalie, they're freshmen with the attackers. Their younger attackers have stepped up. For men's lacrosse, it hasn't really panned out. And that's why we're seeing these teams very different spots. Rutgers women's lacrosse ranked. They're, set for a pretty solid Big Ten slate, you could say, hopefully. Men's lacrosse, they're not ranked. They're below 500. And the season already looks like to be a failure. So,
Well, we get two more things to touch on real quick. We'll touch on baseball and then we'll end on a positive note with some softball. Rutgers baseball played their opening conference series against the Iowa Hawkeyes. They did take the first game. It was a close 5-4 victory, but the next two were not too pretty for the Knights. 16-0 in game two they lost and
oh
6
my
in the
God.
second game. Um, and it's kind of unfortunately what you expected from this team this year. When you bring in so many new players, 27 new players, it's tough to gel, and it's tough, especially when you have a lot of younger guys starting. Um, you look at the first game, and that's kind of the game that you expect Rutgers to play. They got on the board early, they put guys on base, and it was Trevor Cohen and Peyton Bonds who got on, and then Nick Tomasetto came up, put the ball in play, throwing error, scores 2 runs. Great. And then, slowly but surely the offense kind of tails off, and Iowa got themselves back in the game, and then just before you knew it, it was a tie game again. And if it wasn't for an absolute shot by Peyton Bonds, 456 feet. Uh,
Yeah.
without that home run, it's a totally different ball game. And then you look at the next 2 games, you put up 6 runs in 2 games, but you gave up 28 runs. Not the recipe for success in the simplest terms.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you, Nick. I didn't see any of the games. I was too busy in Evanston, but I'm sure you were tuning into most of them, or if you could, or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
and the second game, Rutgers was back and forth with Iowa. I mean, all up until I
the
want to say
16-0 game?
no, the third game, sorry.
I
The
was gonna say
12
back
the
and forth.
the 12-6 game, not the 6
Wow.
nothing game. No, that was not back and forth. But the 16 nothing game, it was a tie game going into the fourth inning. Then Rutgers actually took the lead. And then from the fifth inning on, it was all Iowa scoring, what's this? A lot of runs. They had,
7,
well, yeah, and like I said,
6 yeah, yeah.
it
4 in the
was,
sixth and 3 in the seventh.
yeah, it was a collapse by Rutgers. You give up some big innings, and then the sixth inning capped off with a 3-run home run. Not what you want to see. And then obviously another 3-run homer in the seventh to put it away. And you hope for different fortunes. Rutgers has quite a few games this week. They have a game on the road against Penn tomorrow. Then they have a game at home against Wagner on Wednesday. And then on Friday, they start a series with Cal Baptist. So definitely an opportunity for them to get back in the win column, try to, strengthen up this lineup as they head towards Big Ten play. But Matt,
Yeah.
go over to softball now, which had a bit of a rocky start, but they win 4 of 5 games out in Georgia at the Bob Heck Memorial Tournament. And probably the highlight of the weekend was from Ella Harrison, a no-hitter in Friday's game. Not just a no-hitter. It was an impressive performance from the freshman. I mean, she continues to just impress day in and day out. But listen to this line real quick, Maddie M. 7 innings pitched, no hits, no runs, 6 walks, so not the best, but still. But 16 strikeouts out of
Oh
the
my gosh.
what, 28 batters she faced, 27 batters she faced.
26, 26.
So yeah, I'm not good at math, but
I actually just pulled the stat line.
yeah, so 26 batters faced. She struck out 16 batters in 7 innings pitched.
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
and listen, that was a tough game. Only one hit in the entire game, and Rutgers actually didn't even score their lone run on a hit. They scored on a wild pitch that ended up being the walk-off run for that game. But good way to get on the board. Rutgers winning quite a few close contests in this one. I want to say it was 2 or 3 one-run games that Rutgers won, but that's going to have to be the games you want to win, especially when you have a pitcher that's as good as Harrison has been. I want to say she's had in her last 4 outings, they've all been scoreless. She has not given up a run in her past 4 outings. So if you could find any bit of offense to get her going, it's going to be a good season for Rutgers. I don't know how well they'll fare in conference play, but I think it could be a respectable season for the Scarlet Knights.
Yeah, I mean, I think the offense is a really, really big part. Look at the games this week. They beat North Dakota the first game 1-0. They lose North Dakota 11-3 in 6 innings. They beat West Georgia 1-0, beat Colgate 1-0. So, sorry, 3-1 beat Colgate. So, and then beat Georgia State 8-0 in 5 innings. But the other games, they all were super duper low scoring for Rutgers. So, and most of those games they pitched really well except for the North Dakota second game. So, I think the pitching is there. It's going to be the offense. That's really gonna be the crucial part. And hey, they play Wagner home on Tuesday. Then they play Maryland, open up Big Ten play. And then they're basically in the swing of the things with the season. So they're finally back in Piscataway. I feel like we were just always writing like in our recaps. They're in Georgia, they're in Florida, they're in
Well,
California, they're in I don't
the,
know Atlanta,
they're
everywhere.
softball a
So
little different because they have like their tournament schedule to start the season. And most of those games are going to be played in like the warm weather areas because who the hell wants to come play a softball tournament in Piscataway in the middle of February when it's
yeah,
still 25 degrees outside? But yeah,
yeah.
finally getting some games back here on the banks. You love to see it. And listen, softball is a unique sport because if you have that one shutdown player, especially when it's a pitcher, you can win a lot of games.
Hmm.
You saw it during the weekend. I think Harrison threw what, two or three different games in the span of
Yeah.
4 days. So if you get that one player, there's a lot of success to be had. And all it takes is just that little spark from your offense. And I think Rutgers is getting closer to it. I don't know. I obviously they're not quite there yet, but I feel like the more they play and the tougher opponents they face, the closer that they're going to get to having that consistent offense. And ultimately, that's all you need.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see how it pans out in Big Ten play. Wagner, not really the best softball team. And then Maryland, I'm actually not sure how they are. I was gonna look, but I didn't look real quick. But yeah, let's see, softball. Sorry, it's loading. 10 and 11. So, you know,
Not right around where Rutgers is at, a couple games under 500.
yeah, let's see. Last season they were 24 and 30, so a pretty bad season last year. Rutgers actually had a much better season than them. So, you're back home. You could beat Wagner, and you could probably take 2-0 against Maryland. I think that's probably the best outcome you'd say. Well, obviously sweeping would be the best outcome, but pretty fair expectation.
Without a doubt. But that's all the sports we have for this week. We have a lot more coming up, obviously, next week, as Rutgers men's basketball is headed to the Big Ten tournament. Maddie M will be there with coverage, along with Camden Markle. And hopefully we see some stuff out of that. Then we got wrestling national tournament. We'll see who makes it for the Scarlet Knights. And then, as we keep saying, spring sports getting in the full swing of things. So if you want to listen to all things Rutgers sports, tune in here on Mondays to the Rutgers Rundown podcast. You can find us on YouTube at The Daily Targum and, of course, online at thedailytargum.com. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in this week. Tune in next week to the Rutgers Rundown podcast to listen to more things Rutgers sports. I'm your host, Nick Hart, and Matt Mangum signing off for now.